Hey everyone, Dean Giles here, and welcome to this video on beginning rhythmic reading. Learning to read and write rhythms is an important tool for musicians and also an excellent way to develop your rhythmic vocabulary. First thing we need to do is identify the symbols that we use to read and write music with. So in the next segment, we'll look at all the notes and rests. The notes and rests are the symbols that we use to read and write rhythms with. So in this segment, we're going to look at the most commonly used notes and rests. Let's start with the whole note. Then we have the half note, the quarter note, the eighth note, and the 16th note. Now theoretically we could go beyond the 16th note, but for now we're going to leave it right there. Let's take a look at the symbols for the rests. Here is the symbol for a whole rest, a half rest, quarter rest, eighth rest, and 16th rest. Now you really want to familiarize yourself with the names of all these symbols for both the notes and rests. And what I recommend for my students is they make index cards and draw all the symbols on the index cards and then drill themselves 2 or 3 times a day until they really have all the names of the notes and rests down cold. So go ahead and make your index cards and I'll see you in the next segment. Okay, so in this segment we're going to take another look at the notes and rests and their relationship to each other. Okay, remember that the notes and rests represent a fraction of time or a period of time since music happens over time. So in the next series of graphics I've used a simple circle chart to identify the period of time that each one of the notes represent. Okay, let's take a look at the whole note. And you can see that the whole note or the whole rest is the entire circle or the entire amount of measured time. And probably because you're familiar with the word half, you'll understand that of course a half note or a half rest would represent half that amount of measured time. So it's simple fractions really. And you would notice now, of course, that 2 halves or 2 half notes would take the same amount of time as the one whole note. Alright, so let's move down now to the quarter note, and you can see that in red here, represented in this circle chart in red. And you can see that the quarter note takes up 1/2 of a half, okay, or 1/4 of the entire represented period of time or measured period of time. You could think of this like a sporting event, like a football game. You have 4 quarters in a football game. 2 quarters make up 1/2 of the game, and all 4 quarters make up the entire game. Okay, it's the same thing. Again, it's just really simple fractions. So if you've had fractions in school, we're going to just apply that to taking a period of time and subdividing or dividing it down into different segments or pieces or fractions of time. And we're going to represent those fractions or pieces of time with either a rest or a note. Okay, let's look down now to the, let's see, 8th note, and you'll see that represented here in yellow. And you can see again that the 8th is 1/2 of the quarter. Okay, so it would take 2/8 to make up 1/4, or 4/8 to make up 1/2, or 8/8 to make up the entire whole piece of measured time. Remember, during all of this, the amount of measured time hasn't changed at all. We still have the same size of the circle. All we're doing is making smaller pieces of it. And here again you can see the next slide or the next graphic shows the 16th note in, I believe, green, right? Yes, in green. Okay? Now, we're going to take a look at this too one more time just to make sure you got it. And I'm just for fun going to use a pizza. Alright, so here we have a whole pizza and it's cut up into 8 slices. Okay? So you can see no matter how many slices we cut this pizza into, we're going to still have one piece of pizza, or one one size of the pizza. It doesn't change the size of the pizza at all. It's just that one size, and it's just segmented or fractioned down into smaller pieces. Okay, so here I've split the pizza in half. Here I've split it into quarters. And here finally into the individual 8 slices. Okay, so we're going to look at this a little bit closer now as we start to put the notes and rests on the page and look at it in the music. I think you'll get the idea once you kind of see it in the music notation. It's actually not too complicated, and if you need to review or go back and look at this again, go ahead and do that. And also, if you haven't had time to kind of memorize your note and rest names, you want to probably do that before we get too much further in. So take a little bit of study of time, go through those index cards that you made in the previous section, and I'll see you back in the next section as we start to put the notes on the page. So before we actually get the notes on the page, there are a couple more things we do need to look at. And the first thing is this item called the time signature. You'll see that it's just 2 numbers, one number on top of the other number. And this is not a fraction. It has no line in between the 2 numbers. It's just a top number and a bottom number. And the top number has a certain specific meaning, and the bottom number has a meaning. And we need to know this in order to be able to read the music properly. So let's look at what the 2 numbers in the time signature mean. Okay, the top number is the number of counts that we're going to have in each measurement of music. So if we look back at our circle diagram with our whole note, we could imagine that inside the circle is our measurement of music, or our measurement of time. And within that measurement of time, we're going to have those 4 counts. And those 4 counts are going to be evenly spaced pulses inside the circle. Now, this is very similar to a clock, for instance, where you would have 60 seconds or 60 counts in a minute. When the second hand goes around the clock, you'll have 60 pulses or 60 seconds within every minute. Well, in this case, we're just going to say that we only have 4 counts or 4 pulses inside the circle. Later on, we're going to see that this is going to be shown in a more linear fashion as opposed to in a circle. But for now, let's just think of it as 4 evenly spaced counts or pulses inside a measurement of time. So that's the definition. That's what the top number in the time signature means. The number of counts per measurement of music. Okay, now the bottom number is a little trickier, but hang in with me and I'm sure you'll get it. The bottom number is an indicator of a note. Now, we learned the notes and rests in the previous segment. And the bottom number is going to indicate or tell us which one of those notes equals one of the counts that we have already established by the top number. So if we look at each one of the notes, we can think of each one of the notes as being a fractional equivalent. In other words, the whole note could simply be identified as 1 over 1, like a fraction 1 over 1 or 1. The half note would be 1 over 2, so there'd be a 2 in the bottom. Then the quarter note would be 1 over 4, with a 4 in the bottom of the fraction. Then, of course, the eighth note would be like 1 over 8, and the 16th 1 over 16. Okay? Again, simple fractions here. So the bottom number in the time signature identifies one of the notes. So if the bottom number in the time signature is a 4, which one of the notes has a 4 in the bottom of its fractional equivalent? Well, if you look back, you'll see that the quarter note has a 4 in the bottom of its fractional equivalent. 1/4 or 1/4 is how we identify a quarter, right? Think of again like our football analogy. In our game, we have 4 quarters. Each one of the quarters is 1/4 of the entire game. Okay? So a quarter has a 4th in the bottom. So our time signature is basically telling us when we have a 4 in the top and a 4 in the bottom, which, by the way, is the most commonly used time signature in music. When we have a 4 in the top and a 4 in the bottom, we're looking at 4 counts per measurement of music, and the bottom number, the 4, indicates to us that the quarter note will be equal to 1 count. So, in order to properly fill our measurement of music, we would have to have some combination of 4 quarter notes, or the time that it would take to count up 4 quarter notes. Okay, so we could just simply put 4 quarter notes in a measurement of music, each one equaling 1 count in this case, and then we would have our measurement of music. It would be complete with all 4 counts. Now, if a quarter note is equal to 1 count, in this particular case, how many counts would a half note be equal to? Each quarter equals 1, and we have how many quarters in a half? Again, think of our football analogy. 2 quarters in a half. Each quarter equals 1 count. 1 quarter plus the other quarter is 2. Okay? So each quarter equals 1, 2 quarters, 2, and that's a half. So 2 quarters equals the same amount of time as 1 half. And so in this case, our half note would be equal to 2 counts. So if we use a half note in our measurement of music, it takes up 2 of the counts, and we only have 2 counts left, because we only need a total of 4 in this case. Okay, you following me? If not, go back and review. Alright, now let's look at the whole note. Now we have, think again about our football analogy, we have the whole game to think about, all 4 quarters. Each quarter is equal to 1, and of course then the entire whole game, or the whole note in this case, would equal 4 counts. Okay? So because the bottom number of the time signature is a 4, it has indicated to us that the quarter note equals 1 count. Now this can change, but for right now, we're looking at the quarter note equaling 1 count. So if the quarter note equals 1 count, then the half note equals 2 counts. The whole note equals 4 counts. Now this gets a little trickier when we go backwards and we start looking at the 8th note. One of the things we have to think about is how many eighths are there in a quarter? There are 2 eighths in a quarter. Okay? So we could say that each eighth is 1/2 of the quarter. So each of our eighth notes then would only receive 1/2 of a count. Alright? This is why in a measure of 4, in a 4 count measure, we're going to need 8 eighth notes in order to complete the measure, because each eighth is only worth 1/2 of a count. So we need 2 eighth notes just to get 1 count. Okay, now this even goes further down when we look at the 16th note. And of course the 16th note is 1/4 of a count. So it would take 4 16ths to equal 1 count. Or 2 16ths to equal 1/8. Or 1/2 of a count. Are you still with me? Okay. Maybe it's a good idea for you to kind of review at this point just to make sure you're kind of getting this. So again, when we have the time signature, this is the most common time signature is 4/4. And when we have that 4 in the bottom of the time signature, that bottom number is a 4. That indicates that our quarter note equals 1 count. That means our half note would equal 2 counts. Our whole note would equal 4 counts. Our eighth note would equal 1/2 of a count. And then our 16th note would equal 1/4 of a count. Okay? So we'll be back in the next segment, and we'll make sure you kind of got that, and we'll look into getting the notes on the page. Okay, so let's look at a simple setup where we can put two measure lines, or we're going to just kind of identify a measurement here. We're going to put two lines up, and that's going to be our measurement of music. And we've decided that inside our measurement of music, we're going to have these 4 counts. So we're going to put those up on top. Now, in each count, we need to have either a note or a rest equaling 1 count. All right? So just for now, we're going to go ahead and put 4 quarter notes, 1 under each count. So how would we play this rhythm? Well, we're going to verbally count the numbers that are on top, and then when we see a note underneath the number, we're going to play, and if we saw a rest underneath the number, well, we wouldn't play. Okay? In this case, we have all 4 notes. So I'm just going to clap out the rhythm. It would just be very simply like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I clapped every time I counted because there was a note underneath every number. Now if I put some rests in there, I'm not going to clap when I get to the rest, but I'll still count. Okay, so here's the next example, and it's going to look like this. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see, under the numbers 2 and 4, there were rests that time, so I didn't clap, but I still kept counting. Let's do another one. Okay, how about this example? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in that one, we had rests under the counts 2 and 3. Okay, do you see how this is working now? Now we can start to use our other note values. So far we've just had quarter notes and quarter rests. But let's look at putting a half note in. Now remember that the half note is going to last for 2 counts. So this time when I clap the half note, I'm going to hold my hands together to indicate that it is lasting for 2 counts. Okay? So we're going to put a half note on the 1 count, and then we're going to have 2 quarter notes on the 3 and 4. Remember that the half note taking up 2 counts is going to take the count 1 and the count number 2. And the next place I can possibly put a note wouldn't be till 3. Okay? Alright, let's look at the half note and 2 quarter notes. It would be like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Let's look at moving the half note now. How about if we move the half note to the 2 count? Now the half note will take up counts number 2 and 3. So we'll put a quarter note on the 1 count, a half note on the 2 count, and another quarter on the 4 count. Now let's look at that rhythm. That would look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. How you doing out there? You getting that? Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with looking at adding more of the different notes and rests in the next segment. So one more thing I wanted to talk about before we get back to our rhythmic reading is this concept of how fast or slow the notes are. A lot of times I'll say to my students, okay, we're going to play 16th notes here. And they'll say, yes, but aren't 16th notes really fast? And the answer to that is, well, they can be or they don't have to be. It's all a function of something that we call tempo. And you might have heard this word tempo, again, referring to our sports analogy when announcers refer to the speed or the tempo of a game. They might say this game has a very fast tempo, or the tempo of this game is very slow. And it's the same in music. We use tempo in order to determine how fast or slow we're going to play the notes. Now, oftentimes, tempo is attached to the quarter note, and we usually have an indicator, something to the effect of there will be a certain amount of quarter notes per minute, or pulses per minute. So I'm just going to use the example of 60 pulses or 60 quarter notes per minute. Or in other words, the quarter note equals 60 per minute. And over here on the music stand I have a metronome. And the metronome is a key tool for every musician to use and to practice with in order to help us maintain a steady, constant pulse while we're practicing. So I have this metronome set right now to 60 pulses or clicks per minute, which of course is one every second. Alright? So here it is. So the metronome now is clicking along at 60 pulses per minute, one every second. And we're going to assign those clicks to our quarter note. So since the quarter note equals one count, each one of these clicks is now one count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Okay, so let's look back at some of our previous examples and see what it's like to play or clap those examples along with the metronome as it's giving us that steady pulse. And in this case, again, we're going to say 60 pulses per minute, or the quarter note equals 60. Also, one other thing I wanted to tell you about is this thing called the count-off. And you hear this all the time when you listen to bands live or you go to see bands. You'll either see the drummer doing it or perhaps the band leader or conductor counting the band off at the beginning of the song. And oftentimes we really hear the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the band starts 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they're into the song. Okay? Well, what the count-off does is it lets the band know, first of all, what the tempo is going to be of the piece. You want to make sure that your count-off tempo and the tempo of the piece that you're playing, the music that you're playing, is the same. And then also it tells everyone when to start. Okay, we're all going to start usually on the 1 right after the count-off. So there are a couple of different ways of counting off. But for right now, we're just going to give a 4 count off. 1, 2, 3, 4, play. Okay? And that play is the 1 of the next measurement of music, or the first measurement in the piece of music that we're going to play. So I'm going to start the metronome. And we're going to go back and we're going to look at our first example, the one that had all 4 quarter notes. Okay? So here we go. I'll give you a 1 bar or a 4 count off. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now let's do the second example we had with the rests on counts 2 and 4. Here we go. A 4 count off, and we'll begin. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now let's look at the next example, which had the half note on the 1 count and then quarter notes on counts 3 and 4. Again, a 1 bar or 4 count off. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I hope you're following that okay. Now, what we really want to do here with this is start to string all these measures together. So I'm going to do all 3 of those with the metronome, and then in the next segment what I'll have you do is look at a PDF file that is attached with this video, and we'll start reading the music from that file, from that actual piece of music. So let's do those 3 examples with the metronome. We'll give a 4 count off, and we'll do all 3 of those in a row. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I hope you understood that. And if you didn't, you might want to go back and just kind of review a little bit, because I think all the information's there, and hopefully it's all making sense to you. And I'll see you in the next segment as we look into stringing more and more measures together to create a piece of music. Okay, the next thing to do is to locate the link for the Reading 1 PDF file. And if that link is not available on this page where you're watching this video, you could go to my website, which is www.deangiles.com, and that's DEANGILES.com. And at my website, you'll see a section called Lessons. And under Lessons, there is another page called Downloadable Lesson Files. And within that, you should be able to find the Reading 1 link so that you're able to download that file, that piece of music. When you get it downloaded to your computer, you can open it on your computer and take a look at it. And you can also print it out so that you can have it on a music stand when you're practicing it or playing along in the next segment. When you open up that file, you'll see that we've strung together several measurements of music throughout the page. You'll notice that we have 4 measurements of music on each line. And then it goes down to the next line. And this is going to be very similar to reading anything like out of a book, reading just English words out of a book, left to right, and then down to the next line, left to right, down to the next line, left to right, till you get down to the bottom of the page or the end of the piece of music. Now remember that all of the vertical lines, the lines that are going this way, are the measure lines. And each one of those lines indicates either the beginning of or the end of a measurement of music. And right on the right side of any one of those vertical or measure lines is always the count number 1. Okay? It's always the 1 count. So whatever is on the right side of that measure line is always on count number 1. Doesn't matter if it's a note or a rest. It's always count number 1. So this piece of music is a 4 count piece of music with the quarter note equaling 1 count. So we're going to be counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we'll hit the measure line. We'll go across the measure line and we'll be back to our 1 count again. So every time we see one of those measure lines, it's either the end or the beginning of a measurement of music. Now, we also have, and you can see in the music, we have several horizontal lines as well. And these lines are used for indicating the pitch of the notes, whether the note's pitch is high or low. But for right now, we're just concerned with the rhythmic reading, which happens from left to right. So we're not going to be worried about the pitch of the notes. So I put all of the notes in the same space inside that horizontal grid. Now, all of these elements, the vertical line, the horizontal lines, the time signature, and different things that are included there with the grid are all part of something that we call the staff. So from now on, you'll hear this word, the staff, or staff, as opposed to the grid. Okay? We're going to move on and we're going to start calling it the staff now. So hopefully you've located the link for the Reading 1 PDF file, and go ahead and get that downloaded to the computer. And like I said, you could either read it off the screen, or you could print it out and have it on a music stand as we play through this piece of music in the next segment. Okay, so I'm going to start the metronome. We're set up for 60 pulses per minute, or the quarter note equals 60. So every time we get to a count, that count is going to line up with the click of the metronome. Okay? And each one of those counts also lines up with our quarter notes as they go by as well. Alright, so we're starting at the top of reading number 1. I'm going to set the metronome. I'll give us a 4 count or a 1 bar or 1 measure count off, and we'll be ready to go. So you're going to see me pretty much looking down at the music for the rest of this. So you should be looking at your music and playing along, and hopefully we're together. Alright, here we go. 1, 2, 3, play. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Next line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Next line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Next line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Last line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're done. Okay. So I hope you followed through all that okay, and I hope you're getting the idea of how to read and write rhythms. And I guess that wraps it up for this video. We'll look on to the next video where we get into the smaller note values, the 8th note and the 16th note, and things like that. So I'll see you next time.